Well, first off, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's an honor to be here, and we greatly appreciate you guys all taking time out of your day to hear our story. My name is Erik Darby. I oversee sales and business development for Kanjoya, and as Professor Little was saying, I actually went to BYU for a good majority of my undergrad studying economics. And by show of hands, how many people have heard of Kanjoya here? Anyone? Yeah, very nice. That's all right. How many people have heard of Experience Project, our social media site? That's all right. You know, we often hear that it's the largest site no one's ever heard of, but I can confidently say, just given the size where we are right now, that many of you have probably interacted with our site at some point. I'm joined today by Armen Berjikly, who's a CEO and founder. And Armen is extremely modest, so it's kind of fun for me to stand up here and introduce him. But Armen received his master's degree from Stanford University in Management Science and Engineering with an emphasis on entrepreneurship. Prior to that, he graduated with honors in computer science from Stanford University and was a Mayfield Fellow while there. For those of you that don't know what a Mayfield Fellow is, it's a designation in a program given to the top students that are engineers that desire to go on and be entrepreneurs. Other Mayfield Fellows include the founders of companies such as Twitter and Instagram and many of the Bay Area companies that are starting to bloom now. We're a 30-person team, going to be hiring up to about 50 people here shortly in downtown San Francisco. And what we do and what we focus on is connecting people around experiences, around their emotions. I'll discuss later how this idea and this vision of Armen's became a multi-million-dollar business. But first and foremost, you need to hear Armen's story, because everything we do with sales and marketing and operations and business development really starts and stops with Armen's vision. We're in the business of social media, right, by design. But what we're building are products that really focus on emotion, products that have the ability to change how we interact with people, what we know about one another, products that improve millions of people's lives every single day. And from that, we have a better understanding of emotion. We're able to impact how the web is structured, how Microsoft or Google might advertise to you, what your search results might be. With a better understanding of emotion, we're able to go ahead and influence a great amount. As human beings, emotion isn't everything, right? It's why you decide to come to BYU. It's why you decide to come into this lecture today. It'll influence what you're going to have for dinner tonight. And the ability to better understand that emotion can have significant impacts in the world today. And so I'd like to, at this time, introduce my friend and mentor, Armen Berjikly.
Okay. Is this microphone working? People hear me in the back? Fantastic. Okay. Thank you, Eric. That was a very flattering introduction. I don't know if I deserve that, but can I get the clicker too, by the way? Just so, sorry. There we go. Great. Really an honor to be, I think, speaking to this group in many ways. Thanks for having me. Thanks for sharing our story. But also, I think you're at that stage in life that is the most interesting to me. I mentor tons of startups and pre-startups and people deciding what to do next. And it's interesting from where I went through it. It was a very lonely road. There's not many people that relate to you or try and understand sort of where you're coming from. And I think a lot of people actually envy your situation. You're a lot of opportunity in front of you. I call it sort of the candy store phase of life, where everything looks good, everything tastes good. If you eat it all, you'll be totally ill, and eventually have money. And I think the flip side of the candy store, meaning you're finishing your schooling, you have your networks in place. And you're starting to understand what you're good at and what you want to do. But the flip side of having to make choices is that you're inherently choosing what things you can't do. And so I want this to be the beginning of a conversation. Eric and I are really accessible. We don't think all that much of ourselves, honestly, in that we have a company, we're busy, but everyone's busy. And we'd like to be a resource. And I, again, call back to my time going through this process. And I'd love to always be a friend to you guys and help as you make decisions about what to do. With the opportunities in front of you. And cool. So I'm going to start, I think the purpose that we're here for is to help you guys turn an idea into a roadmap for a business. And the thing that I'd like to zoom back out on first before we even talk about businesses and what to do and how to start them and all that is the idea. Really, which ideas are worth turning into businesses, because many of them are not, as you might imagine. And I've come up with sort of a rule of three. Threes are easy to process. And really, I'll go through them very quickly before we get into sort of the meat of what we're here to talk about. And my first rule is really there's no easy businesses. There's a sense, particularly people who don't start businesses, that you can find something that is relatively fast, it'll make you a lot of money, you don't have to put a lot of work into it, it's not going to stress you out. I'm really here to say that that's not the case, and I've seen many, many different opportunities from all different perspectives. There is no free lunch, and businesses, of course, they have their different nuances, but definitely they take longer, they take a lot more money out of you, and they really are as emotionally draining, irrespective of if you're running a 7-Eleven, or you're franchising a McDonald's, or you're starting a consumer internet company. It is incredibly engaging, no matter what it is. And I looked at some of the speakers that you've had here in the last few weeks, and it's great to share sort of the same hallowed ground as them. But even though we speak different languages, I bet you if you put us in a room together, within 5-6 minutes, we'd all be saying, yeah, I went through this stage, and it was terrible, and this was really fun. And we'd basically have a common ground. Every business is an extreme challenge. Rule 2. The basics that you learn in a business school or business school class of what a good business is, right? The good business model and the core team, the technology, those are wonderful. And in fact, you need them, right? But I like to say they're necessary, but they're not sufficient. And what that really means is, sorry for jumping ahead, but what that really means is you will need those things to build a business, but there's something lacking. Like if you just had that checklist of, hey, this looks great on a textbook environment, you may still very well not have a successful business in the end because of number 3. And really, this one is sort of the touchy-feely side of things that I feel our company really represents well, and I hope to get that across to you. You really have to be in love with your idea, passionately, emotionally engaged to it. And this isn't, again, being enamored with, hey, I found this really cool patent and no one else knows about this, and I'm going to build a cool company around that. It's not at that point. You actually have to really care from the bottom of your heart. And it really boils down to, I think, 2 reasons why, right? The first one is opportunity cost. And it was my first slide. Every business is hard, right? So inherently, if you do one, you're not doing another. So you should really put that time and energy into something you really care about. And the second one is the more insidious one. It kind of creeps up on you as you get into it, 6 months, a year and a half. I really find the metaphor of marriage to be incredibly appropriate. You are absolutely getting into a relationship with whatever idea you turn into a business or attempt to turn into a business. And just like a good marriage and a good relationship, there's ups and downs, there's sickness and health. And the ones that succeed are the ones where you really have a deep, undying affection for that person and a respect. And you can see the parallels so cleanly as you start to get involved deeper and deeper into a business. So with that rule of 3, I want to actually step back and talk about how I came up with Kanjoya. And you'll apologize for the dry air is getting to me. I've heard that's a thing here. So my story is a very, very deeply personal one, why I started this company. It was not a checklist at all. I kind of backed into it. And I want to walk you through that. And it really starts with, if you'll imagine with me for a second and kind of put yourself in the shoes of what happened. So imagine you wake up one day and you're totally fine the night before, you didn't eat anything funky, you didn't feel poorly, but you wake up and one of your eyes is just not working. It's just betraying you. Colors are gone, your vision's blurry, kind of hurts. And you kind of go through processes. Everyone's had something like this happen, right? And no matter what, you rub it, you blink, you wash it, you talk to some friends, no one relates to it, and they're like, something's up with you. You do what almost everyone does, which is you go online, you type in "I dysfunctional" or whatever. You end up at a terrible website called WebMD, usually around 2 in the morning. And WebMD, why is it a terrible website? Because every page on WebMD ends with "you are going to die in 24 hours," and you have to rush to the hospital, you have a brain tumor, whatever it is. It's not helpful. And so you do finally what you really need to do, which is you call your doctor, and you go ahead and you make an appointment. And they do some tests on you, they check you out, and then you wait, right? You wait a couple of days, terrible to wait. And you notice the doctor didn't wave you out of there immediately and say there's nothing wrong with you, so you know something's coming. You go back in, and they sit you down, and they tell you, in this case, hey, I hate to break this to you, but you have multiple sclerosis. You have an illness that will never leave you, that will always destroy your body from the inside out. It will attack your brain, your central nervous system. You'll probably be in a wheelchair. You probably have difficulty talking, communicating, and living a normal life. And the medicines are terrible. They cost 6 figures. They have side effects as bad as the illness. And so off you go. This sounds ridiculous, but honestly, this is what happens. And this happened to a very, very close friend of mine, and I was sort of an eyewitness to all of this going down. And again, it seems like I'm kind of making it out to be, and I hope you never are in that situation where you see just how real that situation I described is to anyone that goes through any sort of diagnosis, or honestly, if you zoom it out a little bit, anyone that goes through a change that they really didn't want or expect. And here's, let's focus on multiple sclerosis, as ultimately it's very tied to the origin of the company. Here's something where almost 3 million people have this, right? It's not that rare, unfortunately, and 200 more, by the end of today, 200 more people will have gone through what I just described. And yet, there's this incredible feeling of isolation. You're alone with this. And it doesn't matter. These statistics, you may not even know them. It's just that very deeply personal, oh my gosh, what happened? And who's going to help me? And so I saw this happen, and I was just so affected by it, the sense of hopelessness and isolation. And you'll find, I'm sure as you've gone through all the entrepreneurship talks, challenges are opportunities, right? And this was a very, very deeply personal challenge to see my friend go through this. And I refused to believe that this was the status quo, that you would just have to get ill and maybe take some medicines that didn't really help. And so I threw myself into it the best I could. Erik kind of rattled off my training, but I'm straddled the sides of engineering and marketing. And so I was able to kind of figure out, hey, there's actually lots of really smart people tackling this illness like every illness. And that's something that we're very thankful to God for. There's lots of really brilliant people, companies, colleges, universities, attacking conditions. And the problem with that is that the people who have these conditions rarely know what's going on. And because it's a dismissive attitude, quite frankly, that the doctors either don't have time or don't have faith in the research to pass it all the way to the patients. And they also don't want to build false hope, and there's various excuses. But the reality is, when you tell someone who's just been hit by essentially a car in their life in this way, that there are people trying to make this better, there are people trying to make this go away, they immediately move into a better state. So that's what I did. I built a website called This Is MS because I was going through the research, and on a daily basis there was tons of new research being posted, peer-reviewed, and even if it was 10 years away, it was a sense that, you know what, things aren't going to be the way they are now always. And I said, well, I'm not going to just share it with my friend. Why not put this out there for everybody to, everybody's affected by this condition, patients, caregivers, loved ones, to be able to take it in. And that's how I started. It was a moonlighting job. I was a product manager at a networking company. And this is what I do when I come home at night. I would do research, post it on a website, and this is what it looks like. In fact, this website still exists. And so what happened is people started coming, and they immediately started to bond. It was a complete surprise to me that a sort of community formed around this situation. And looking back now with the wisdom of hindsight, you're taking a mask that a person wears all day long, which is, hey, I've got this going on in my life, and there's no way I'm going to let my coworkers know, or even sometimes family know, because really they're not going to be able to help. But you put them in an environment, virtual or real, where they can take that mask off and be themselves, right? And say, hey, you know what, my life is affected by this thing. Or my wife's life, or whatever it is, and amazing magic happens. People started to check up on each other, and they started to do their own independent research, and really started to blow my mind what was going on. And I'd like to stress at this point, that website sort of belongs in the Museum of Ancient Website History, right? I mean, look, it was nothing that you'd expect today. It's not, mobile design. It had no multimedia. It was essentially blue, white, and black, and text. Right? And so I like to use the metaphor sort of, it was black and white TV versus what we'd consider, HD or 3D TV today. But look what happened, right? So I did this for about a year and change, just, again, moonlighting, for my own personal gratification, ultimately, and to help a small community that formed. And then I got something that shook me to my core, and we talk about sort of rule number 3, you got to fall in love, right? This was the love at, not first sight, but the thing that changed me. And this is on my way to work one morning, I got an email from someone who used the multiple sclerosis site. And, email's long, and I couldn't pull it all out, but I kind of pulled out the 4 sentences that really made the impact. And my summary of that story, it was a gentleman with multiple sclerosis. He had it for a decade. He was confined to a wheelchair. And his story was very simple. It was, hey, I had reached a point last night. This is an email to me. He doesn't know who I am. Hey, administrator of website. I reached this point where I was ready to take my own life. Right? He was at a point of suicide. And he said something compelled him to search one more time. And he went to Google, typed in multiple sclerosis support, whatever it was. And he's like, I ended up on your website, and I've been up all night. And for the first time in this decade, I feel a glimmer of hope. And I just wanted to say thank you. I get goosebumps every time I tell this story. I've told the story a zillion times because I read this, and you can kind of think sort of the reaction felt like this. I don't know why there was water in my mouth at the time, but I did feel like I was absolutely slapped in the face by sort of the gravity of what this person had bothered to write me. I mean, this was something so simple and something I did, in free time, and ultimately someone was crediting it with saving their life. And so these 4 sentences ultimately, they represented a lot of change in this person's life, right? We hopefully had gone from a position of desperation to some hope. It changed my life because I quit my job in a period of 24 hours and just started off on this adventure that's led me here. And it really, ultimately, I believe there are 4 sentences that changed the world. Because as Erik kind of polled you guys, you don't see and interact with this site perhaps on a daily basis, but tens of millions of people do. And you'll see some stats later. They'll tell you how much the site has impacted, and we've saved tens of thousands of lives. And so when I decided to say, this is probably a better use of my skills and talents than working at a networking company, I had to, of course, run it through then rule 2, which was the business case. Right? Is this just me getting very emotional and very psychotic and feeling like I could go change the world? I had to run it through some quick filters. And first of all, the thing that dawned on me when I got that email, the power of what was going on at that very simple website dedicated to one condition could be generalized to anyone. And it doesn't have to be a condition, right? Every person in this room has a really interesting set of experiences. We'll dig into that. And some are awesome and some are really not that awesome. And the ability to connect with someone else that gets it, profoundly powerful. On obviously an extreme where you're saying, hey, this could save someone's life. But on a day-to-day basis, in fact, our friends are the ones that understand us best. And sharing experiences is very core to our nature. And so I started to really think before I turned in my resignation, if I'm feeling this way, what's the market, right? Let's test out the very basic assumptions, right? And it was about, hey, it wasn't about MS, it was about sharing an experience. And so, wow, experiences, is that weird that people share experiences? No. Experiences are inherently social. We have them to share them. And in fact, that's only gotten more so as time has gone on. Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, et cetera. It's almost like if I've done something, it hasn't happened unless I've posted it and shared it with someone. And so that's a very, very powerful indicator. Even, we're talking 5, 6 years ago when I was starting this. The addressable market, right? You don't want to build something that 10 people can use or even 2.5 million people can use. I did a very quick, back of the envelope. I said, how many people on Earth have experiences? Oh, everybody, right? How many experiences do they have? Oh, wow, like infinite. And so it was, ultimately, that was our space. And ultimately, also, what value did you provide? It's not just fun to share just because it's something we do. We do it because we like to have someone else interact with us. We do it because we can share our own wisdom. Why are we here today talking, right? We feel good to be able to share some of the things that we've gone through. And the support and wisdom is one thing, but then you also think about Oprah Winfrey, right? All the experiences on her show, as compelling as it was discovery. It was like, I want to know what it's like to be a crazy, Tom Cruise action for a day, right? And it's learning about somebody else's experiences. So I was like, tick, 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 I got something special here. And one of my early investors, a gentleman by the name of Ron Conway, one of the godfathers of Silicon Valley, he has a really cool maxim, right? And he's like, when you're thinking about a consumer internet company, just run it through this quick filter, which is, are you taking an offline or real world behavior, and are you bringing it online? And if you're doing that, where you're bringing it online, where it's easier, faster, perhaps cheaper, you've tapped into something that's fundamental, right? And so that's exactly what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about something humans did since campfires, and now we're bringing it into an environment where 2 people who may end up being the best of friends but never would have met have an opportunity to connect. And that became Experience Project. And so let me just justify this further by kind of driving it home, right? Just during this little talk, 30 minutes or so that we're up here, there's 1,000 people whose lives will be changed by cancer. 400 people are going to have a relationship split. 5,000 people are going to not be with us after this talk, hopefully not because of this talk. And then 15,000 children will be born, 30,000 new parents, right, on a positive note. So think about, just like as you're sitting here, there's all this stuff happening. And it's really kind of the poetry of what we created is to take in account 2 things. One, I touched upon this a little bit earlier, we're a combination of really, first of all, compelling things, but challenging things as well as fun things, right? So maybe being a parent is really wonderful, but maybe the fact that you can't stand your boss's face is another thing, right? And that makes you a person, a real person. And we know and we acknowledge that at our company, every person has a unique or individual voice. We won't quite call it unique, but an individual voice, and they are a combination of challenge and triumph. And if you stop for a second, the side that I'm right next to is Facebook, right? We are the most beautiful people. We only go on vacation. We have the most beautiful friends, and et cetera, right? You don't post the blue side on Facebook. or Twitter. You could replace really any social media network because those are really social marketing platforms. They're not meant to tap into sort of your foundational behavior. And my next point will be prefaced by this very rude statement. You are not a unique snowflake. You've been told your whole life you're a unique snowflake. I'm going to change that here today, and I have no qualms with it because the numbers are not in your favor of being a unique snowflake, right? The fact that all of your sort of combination of experiences makes you different, yes, in a lot of sort of superficial ways, but it also leads to an epidemic problem in the United States, Western world of, despite the fact that we have more and more means of communicating, we meet more people, we have bigger social networks, isolation, depression, loneliness is higher than it's ever been. And it's because we feel like we are alone and unique in whatever we're going through. And the numbers, I'm an engineer by background. There's 7 billion people that share this planet with us. There's 20 or 15 times that have been here before us. There's really good odds that whatever you're kind of dealing with, somebody else has gone through. And it's an opportunity to connect you to those people. So the final part of what became this product experience project was to take, hey, you're this interesting person in your combination of experiences. There's other people that don't just share one particular thing with you, but share the combination. Right? So you find the military mom whose husband is deployed to Iraq, who has a child with ADHD, and who's rescuing dogs. That combination that makes you you, there's lots of other people out there. And that's what Experience Project does as a product, and voila, there it is. It's really about putting those experiences out in a very simple format. People post their stories with it, and we use that to connect folks. So it's not a social network. We call it a social discovery network for the nuance, because we bring complete strangers together on very, very meaningful things. And I'll put some stats up here, because I could have said all that and been like, hey, we're just starting out, we hope people use it. No, people are using this thing, and a lot of those hypotheses have been proven out. And of course, the ceiling is infinite, so we're nowhere near done. I still feel like we're in the early stages, but over 12 million people a month use this thing. They log in for half an hour every time. That's like Facebook World of Warcraft type stuff. And 25 million experiences have been shared. It's really hard to find something that you might have been experiencing that someone else hasn't already posted, and therefore, well, we just eradicated that idea that you're isolated. It's Silicon Valley tradition. We can't really tell you our precise revenues, but they're significant. And that's important because it finances the accomplishment of your vision. And we have a 30-person team. And so now that I've kind of told you how we got here, I did want to spend a little bit of time on the tactics. As I said, I do a lot of sort of coaching and mentoring in this space, and I do want to give you my experience with the raising of the money, the building of the product, and the building of the team. And I think the cool thing is you guys can see all the different speakers and what they've said and pull out maybe themes. First question of do you need to raise money? Do you need to raise money, right? Everyone kind of thinks that the right thing to do, particularly if you're doing like a internet-y or technology-based startup, you got to go straight to Silicon Valley, go to Sand Hill Road, start meeting with the Excel guys, I believe we'll be here at some point, and raise money. Raise money means you sell a big portion of a company that doesn't quite exist yet, and you bring in some other opinions, and you bring in some people that are motivated ultimately by the financial outcome. So there's a big sort of deal that you're making there that kind of plays good versus evil in some ways, right? You gotta think about that. And my quick answer, in our case, we did raise money. And I have a very simple sort of litmus test. If you feel that with whatever resources you have in your own pocket or around you, you can reach the point where your business model that you've envisioned is executing, don't raise money. Build a business the real way, the traditional way, right? Lean startup way. If you can't get there, right? And I will admit, we couldn't. My vision was not to build a site for a particular demographic or a particular experience. I wanted the world's experiences on this property. And that's a big, big breadth-first approach, and it's going to take a while. But once you get there, then you kind of are dominant across the spectrum. And so in our case, raising money actually made a ton of sense because I knew I wouldn't really be able to turn it into a larger business that could sustain itself until it got to that stage. So that raising money bridged me over to be able to get there. Now, also keep in mind, once you raise money, you will keep raising money. So it is a treadmill, and everyone says this because it is. It is very rare. I know one company out of the hundreds that I'm intimately familiar with that only raised money once and was kind of done. So it is an interesting thing to accomplish. And again, all of these questions, obviously, I can't tailor it to the 150 people in this room. If you have questions, obviously in the Q&A section, but we'll be available forever on to help you with your particular case. Next point, I really harp on this a lot, build something. I know our audience today is less engineers, more business marketing. And so I want to stress this even more. I took it for granted that I could build a website, right? And it's a simple website, quite honestly. I can't take any credit really for having done anything innovative in that first iteration. But the fact that something tangible came out and it wasn't a business plan that was bound at Kinko's moves you into a different dimension when you're trying to talk to people who are potentially going to give you money, right? And so whatever it is, having a tangible product, you should, if you can. If you don't know how to code, there's like every online class in the world now that you can actually get a Harvard, MIT, Stanford engineering education for free, and be able to at least get something up that is tangible that you can look at in a room with a potential investor. This one's relatively obvious. Use any network you can find. I put it up there because you kind of scoff at how it might happen. But in our case, this was me. I went away for 2 years into a room and started building what became Experience Project. And at the end of sort of that 2-year cycle, I felt that I had something that an investor might care about. I felt that the business model was feasible, but I had to get there. Obviously, I had to build something. And then the way I ended up meeting my lead investor was I happened to mention it to a friend at a party who played poker with a friend who is friends with a big investor. And that is honestly like 8 layers. I can't even keep track of how many layers removed it was. And you would never have placed a bet on that kind of outcome. But use any network you can find to promote what you're doing, because you don't know who it is that's actually going to step in to help you out. And the last point here is it's get usage to limit dilution. And it's getting quite into the details here, but as I said, when you raise money, they don't give you money for nothing. They take a chunk of your company. If you're at the very beginning stages, it's somewhere between 20 to 40% of your company for a relatively small amount of money. And so as a first-time entrepreneur, as many of you in this room would be, you can't rely on being someone who has a name recognition or a series of other companies behind you to make what you're doing more valuable. Really, you're depending on what you've built and what you can show. And ultimately, if you've built something that's actually usable and not just a demo, the more people using your product, right, more people you have customers or actual users, this validates you. It gives you credibility that cannot be bought, it cannot be borrowed. And as you have that, that lets you build a stronger case, one, for an investment, and two, why you're going to be worth a lot more than the investor might be thinking. And so therefore, this raises the price of your company. Of course, it gives you more confidence and more intelligence, right? So let's say you did that, right? We'll gloss over that whole raising money situation and say, what did you do? You raised it, and now it's time to build a team out. And maybe this one you might have answered before you raised money. This is a very existential question, alone or with a co-founder or multiple co-founders. I started Experience Project and ultimately Kanjoya on my own. Not for lack of knowing people, not for lack of opportunity, but I made some very conscious choices. And I think in some cases, first of all, you don't have a choice. You've come up with an idea and it passes the 3 rules, and you're in a group of people and you're all just going to co-found. Done, easy. You've solved that issue. Otherwise, you really have to ask yourself, let's say I'm a person that doesn't have an engineering background. Should I go and make the person who builds the product my co-founder, or should I just hire them? Maybe give them a little bit of stock. Again, I have a way of boiling this down so it's not such an existential angsty question. Is the other person going to bring an authentic passion to an aspect of your company that will matter? There's a lot of words. Really, it means, hey, if you're building a product that will be engineering-centric, right? It's going to be something that it will be a shining city on a hill in terms of engineering accomplishment, and you're an MBA. Then I would say that the engineer that you bring in to be the person that builds a product, you better make them your co-founder, right? Because they're going to be the one that is under the spotlight when your product starts getting PR, when you start raising money, because that's really the crux of the company. In my case, why didn't I do a co-founder? There's 2 reasons. One, I felt like I had enough breadth between marketing and engineering. I knew what I knew. I also knew what I didn't know, and I felt like I'd get through. Also, there was sort of a moral responsibility. When you bring someone into your company, co-founder or employee, you're changing their life. I feel that every day when I walk into our office at 30 people, when it was 5 people, it was 2 people. Someone's making a commitment. I mean, Erik has put in beyond, there's no such thing as the limit to the amount of sweat equity this man has put into the company. And if you're not confident that your idea is going to go somewhere, you're changing someone's life, you're selling them a promise, and you really have to be able to sort of cash that check. And so you have to do a gut check on an emotional side as well. Do you feel comfortable with somebody else being part of this company from the very, very early stages? And that really ties in with, do they agree to the 3 rules, right? Are they emotionally invested? Do they understand that the business is going to be very challenging and a lot longer than they think it is? because it's really easy to attract co-founders if they think it's going to be a 6-month project, but once you get in, it might not be that short. I make this point, I'm controversial about this. This concept of stealth mode, if you don't know what it is still, unfortunately, a lot of companies that have that ridiculous blank web page, right? And it says like, blah, 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 coming soon, jobs, right? Like, why would I sign up for a job at a company I don't know? Is ridiculous. The stealth mode concept where you hide what you're doing because you think someone's going to copy you. If someone can copy you that easily, it doesn't pass the first 3 rules. Honestly, it's not going to pass. In fact, rule 2. There are how many 7 billion people on this planet with us, right? Your idea has been had and chewed over, and someone almost started. I mean, ideas are not special, right? Execution is what's special. So when you go into stealth mode, you're telling people that you're not confident that your idea is unique, and that you're also not confident that someone can copy you. And I think those are exactly the wrong things to project to the team that you're trying to build. And that's the reason I make fun of it, because there's always a logo, some really cryptic sentence that makes no sense, and then we're hiring, right? Nonsense. How could you hire a team if they don't know what you're working on? So I say build it, talk about it, and you'll attract people who actually use your product. And these next 2 steps will kind of go through that, which is the pillars of culture. As you're building your company, those first few people you bring into the team, whether they be co-founders or hires, they're going to affect what your team is like going forward, right? As much as you may have a megalomania, and you're like, I'm the one that starts the company, it's always going to be about me. 1, you shouldn't think that way, and 2, that's not the case, right? Companies grow and they need to actually excise the founder over time and work around them. And so those first 4, 5, 10, 20, and as big as your company gets, you can kind of take a percentage. Those people set the tone for the type of people you will attract. Let's talk about our company. I ended up hiring my very, very best friend to work as the first employee. He was CTO, and I was 2 years in, and he's probably the finest person I know, and I think you'd agree to that. Nice, brilliant, and thoughtful, caring, and what a surprise, our entire engineering team has now become nice, thoughtful, caring, brilliant people. Like attracts like. And so it's very tempting to hire a mercenary who's got a really cool resume, but may not jive with you culture-wise, and may not jive with ultimately who are they going to want to hire. So think about the pillars of culture. And this last one, I'm still learning this, guys. I am the scrimping on key hires. Like until a year ago, we didn't have an operations person. So we had a 25-person company or 20-person company. I was writing the payroll checks. I was doing all of the expense reports. I was doing the building of furniture, and I was all the way, by the way, running the company, meeting customers, et cetera, right? And we finally listened to someone wiser than us and hired an operations person. And that person now is working, I feel like, 60 hours a week. We're all working 60 hours a week. And somehow that means I was doing that person's role without them existing, and they're fully engaged in it. That just means I was not doing it well, right? So do not, in those early stages, it's a very big temptation to say, I just don't have the comfort in bringing in someone to, let's say, be an office manager or help me with scheduling or to be a sales lead. Don't scrimp on what you will realize are key hires, because it's very, very penny wise, pound foolish, and it really ultimately assaults your capacity for the emotion that you need to put into the company. And then I'll do one more slide before I hand off to Erik to kind of talk about how we scaled the business. Building the product, there's no way I could tell you how I built a product over 4 years in a slide, so please, suspend your disbelief and give me a break on that, and I'll try and just kind of encapsulate in a few points some really important things in the stage that you're at, right? And I have here sort of our chart over the last 2 years in our growth. And you notice it's not quite a hockey stick, right? A hockey stick, another very sort of, that means you grow, and then suddenly you hit this point of inflection and it blows up, right? Pinterest hit this, Instagram hit this, Facebook in many ways hit this. And you get this strong sense that if I'm building a product that consumers have to use, if I don't hit a hockey stick, it's not working. And that may be the case, honestly. If you're building a game on iOS, you probably want to hit a hockey stick, because there's so much noise, there's so little differentiation. If you're not able to engage your audience with marketing as well as sort of the quality of the product, you may have missed your window. In our case, I think of it slightly differently. Our users are telling us everything about their lives, right? They're trusting us. We're the custodians of that trust and that vulnerability. If 5 million people moved into the property in a day, you can imagine that the culture would change dramatically, right? Why are 5 million people moving in a day? Something must have happened externally. There was a big, let's say, a PR push or something, and it would change. If you take a city even of the size of Salt Lake City or Los Angeles and you move 10 million people in, suddenly everything that won't be, and we'll have to redefine ourselves. So if your product has a longer-term relationship with its users, and you need to build that trust and responsibility. Actually doing it over time might be the right thing to do. And it's not an excuse that, oh, I didn't hit an hockey stick. It just has to match your business. Build, test, build is probably the biggest advice, and I'm sure you hear this over and over again. Eric Ries is a big fan of this. You have to put a product out there in front of people and get feedback, or you won't be able to build a good product. In the contrast, and this has become sort of now hopefully sort of laughable as an approach, but if you go and you say, hey, I really think today, whatever day it is today, November 14th, I have this great idea and I know exactly what it's going to look like. I'm going to go disappear. I'm going to fly away. I'm going to Hawaii or something for 6 months. I'm going to come back in May and I'm going to release this product, right? And it's going to be awesome. That's a very foolish approach, right? Because the market doesn't stand still for 6 months, right? Your idea today may have made perfect sense, but by December 15th, it may have actually been obsolete. It may have been foolish. And you wouldn't have known that. And now you've spent 6 months of time building something that maybe nobody really even wants. So I'm a huge advocate of putting something out there. It goes with the stealth mode comment. Put it out there, let people use it, and you'll learn more about yourself and about your company. And we do this at our company. We do the MVP process, minimal viable product. You can't have people that are perfectionists in that type of environment because you're putting out something that you often know is broken in fundamental ways, but you're trying to learn how people use it, and then you rapidly have to fix it if it does end up being used the way you did. And then this last point, it speaks to sort of you have to have a lot of humility when you're starting your company, and this is very easy if you love what you're doing. So for the first 3 years of our company, maybe almost 4, I was the customer. So I was the person that would answer the emails if somebody said this was broken, or I hate you guys, or I love you guys. I was the person that was the first point of contact. One, because I had violated an earlier rule that I scrimped on a key hire and didn't bring in community management team as early as I should have. But 2, this really let me know what the heck to build, right? Because through the first stages, I stopped coding on this product only 9 months ago, by the way. So I was intimately involved in product and engineering almost all the way through, and I just couldn't think of a better input into what you're building than to actually talk to the people, particularly the angry people, who are using it, and really think about also the culture that you reflect to your users, right? It is, I can't count the number of times I got an incredibly angry, all capital letters email, right? And then you write back in sort of a human way, and that person then becomes the biggest fan. And in fact, there's hundreds of those folks on the site today that still remember that interaction they had with a real person, and think about what they said for the culture of the product, property and the product and so forth. And so really, I think being customer service is incredibly important. So in the end, have you been successful with your product? Yes, usage is important. Revenue is obviously very important. But to me, this stat really speaks to, why did I start this thing? I really wanted to make the world a better place using technology. The number that 4 out of 5 of our users say the site has fundamentally changed their life for the better is probably what I'm most proud of what this product has achieved. And so with that, I'm going to duck back to Eric to talk about scaling out the business side. And remember, sort of in our team environment, a lot of people join our team. They're not driven by money. I'm very proud of that, actually. I'm not driven by money. But you have to view, you can't come to a team meeting for us. We have one every other Friday or whatever. You can't be like, hey, we're going to hit these revenue numbers and everything's going to be awesome. And yeah, revenue, kill yourself, stay at work until 3 in the morning to do revenue. People won't do that, right? There has to be some sort of reason that they're there for that's more than revenue. And the point I just want to make is revenue is not your enemy in a product that you love. Revenue is actually the finance to your vision. Remember that, and your team can actually adopt that. And that if we do make enough money, that means we can hire more people. That means we don't have to be beholden to an investor who might have a different opinion than we do internal to the team. And so it can be very, very core, even to a product that you feel very emotional about. So
great.
Off you go.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going backwards here. Here we go. Mike Maples, who's on our board right now, said innovative companies have innovative business models, right? We had a social site that was growing very rapidly. We're growing about 10% month over month right now. So what we have is 13 plus million people hitting our website. We turn over 85 million page views on a monthly basis, serving hundreds of millions of ads. But that's obvious, right? If we were going to go ahead and serve banners within those categories just on the site, advertising is very obvious. That's not being having an innovative business model. And so data services, this is really interesting. Every day we get over 60,000 pieces of content submitted on our site. And so I said, okay, what are we going to do with this? And I remember it was about 3 years ago, I was in San Francisco and I came across the honeybee on top of a Haagen-Dazs carton. And I said, all right, this is interesting. They're trying to, big Haagen-Dazs, a Nestle company, is trying to run this big cause campaign. I looked at our site at the time, it had about 1 million people, and there were about 1,000 beekeepers out of that 1 million people. And so I called Dryers and Haagen-Dazs. It was right there in Oakland, across the bay from us in San Francisco. And I said, hey, I have about 1,000 beekeepers. Can I introduce your cause into this passion-based community and just see what kind of impact it has on your campaign? And so we went over there, gave the campaign for about 3 months, and said, let's just see what it runs. So what they experience is they had 6,000 to 8,000 people per month running through their campaign over the prior year and a half. They stepped in with us, and they had 60,000 to 80,000 people. And we said, all right, we have something here. We have something given the nature of our community. Because those that were coming in to share stories about loving nature, well, they most likely cared about the Sierra Club. If they're coming in to write stories about loving the fish, well, they most likely cared about Trouts Unlimited or some fishing cause. And so we said, okay, we're able to go ahead and really facilitate conversation with an experience project because so many people are using the site every day to share their experiences. So we went out and we ran this campaign with Nestle. It blew up. It was in Wall Street Journal, all these ad magazines saying, wow, this is really valuable. These guys have 1 million people on their site and they're generating content all day long. Conversational marketing is very, very interesting. And so all of a sudden we had GM and Coke and American Express and kind of the Fortune 10 looking to us being like, what can you do for our brands? And Coke said it best, actually. They had invited us down to Atlanta a few months ago, and they said, you guys are onto something big, because no longer is the world just about impressions, it's about expressions. And if we can look to you to actively get people to talk about our brands or talk about our campaigns, then that is gold to us. Because if they can emotionally connect with an audience around their brand or their brand campaign, they win at the end of the day. But outside of that, we knew we could make millions of dollars by just going ahead and introducing these concepts within our community that wanted and was naturally talking about them. But about a year ago, we were approached by Stanford's Computer Science and Linguistics Department, and they said, you guys have no idea what you're sitting on. Here you have this massive, massive data set. There was 20 million experiences at the time shared by our community, and what you guys have is people coming into your site, writing a story, and then tagging their emotional reactions to it. Like now it's 25 million experiences. And to kind of give you some context of how big that is, Wikipedia, which I'm sure you guys see on a weekly basis, has about 4 million articles in the English language. We have a database of 25 million shared experiences that really reflects the emotion of mankind. And so Stanford said, hey, can we write algorithms on this massive emotional data set? As soon as we heard that and we heard an opportunity, we pulled that team into our company.
Number one, I think you wait for the one, right? When you're evaluating all these ideas that will get thrown at you and you're coming up with them and your friends are coming up with them, you really have to find the one that gets you at the gut and sort of that emotional level. I think finding opportunity and change, if you are in love with your idea, every challenge is actually an opportunity. And in our environment, again, someone getting diagnosed with a serious illness is a terrible, terrible thing, but it led to opportunity that has now helped many, many people. Don't have to be perfect. It's something that I really want to stress for folks, because if I had not gone with this, for example, I'm relatively, for where we are today with our technology, I'm relatively embarrassed to put up a picture like this. This is what it looked like, right? It's such a simple, ridiculous thing. But if I had stopped and said, no, I got to make this thing really beautiful, let me take some time, that person who wrote me that letter might not be with us, right? I mean, you got to think about, there's a very tangible cost to waiting to be perfect, is you don't even know what perfect is. Now, there's a bargain you make if you're going to be sort of more loose and fast, and you're not going to be perfect and put something out just to see how it goes. You then have to agree to improve relentlessly, right? So we turned, a site that was so simple and a concept that was so simple into something that was universal by improving relentlessly. And ultimately, the road is a long one. Don't put artificial deadlines on yourself. To build something truly meaningful, right? Something that will last, we'll talk about 40, 50, 100 years from now, it takes a while. And this is even something that I have to step back. I have family in Los Angeles, and if you think Los Angeles is actually a more sane place than Silicon Valley, I can actually say it is. Because when you're talking about business in Silicon Valley, sort of a 2-year life cycle is forever, right? Wow, you're still there. It's been like 18 months. People react that way when you tell them, hey, I'm still at Facebook for the last 3 years. Like, oh my gosh, you must really love it. No, like think about the companies that are with us today that are from a generation before. Those were not built overnight. And in fact, if you look at sort of the Yahoo and Googles, there's a lot of like sort of the large internet companies do have a longer runway, and it took a while to build it. So don't kind of push yourself into, I must be done in 6 months or it's over. So I hope that between the two of us, we've given you a good sense of what it's like to start this type of company for our own experience. And obviously, we open up to questions.